Terror gripped me like ice water down my spine. I didn't slow this time, just stomped the gas, engine roaring as I barreled past. In the side mirror, it turned slowly as if following my taillights. The road twisted ahead, and I took the turns too fast, tires squealing, praying I wouldn't skid off. I remember that night like it was etched into my bones. The way the rain came down in sheets, so thick it felt like the sky was trying to drown the whole world. It was late fall in the heart of Appalachia. The leaves long turned to mush underfoot, and I'd just spent the weekend at my aunt's place in a little hollow off the Blue Ridge Parkway. She lives in one of those old clapboard houses tucked away where the cell signal dies and the nearest neighbor is a holler away. We'd sat on her porch, sipping coffee laced with a bit of moonshine, talking about the old days, how my grandpa used to tell stories of folks going missing in these mountains, swallowed up by the fog or something worse. I laughed it off then, but driving home that evening, those tales started whispering in the back of my mind. The drive back to my place in Asheville should have taken about 2 hours, but the storm hit hard just as I crested the first ridge. Thunder rumbled like distant artillery, and lightning cracked the sky open, illuminating the twisted oaks lining the road like skeletal fingers reaching out. My old Ford pickup wasn't made for this. The tires were bald from too many backroad hauls, and the wipers squeaked in protest against the onslaught. I left my aunt's around dusk, figuring I'd beat the weather, but Mother Nature had other plans. The rain started as a patter, then built to a roar, pounding the roof like 1,000 tiny hammers. Visibility dropped to nothing, headlights bouncing off the water, turning the asphalt into a slick black river that snaked through the valleys. I tried to keep my mind occupied, flipped on the radio, scanning for anything to cut the monotony. Static mostly, then a faint country station crackling through with some old Johnny Cash tune about walking the line. Fitting, I thought, as the road narrowed and the guardrails vanished, replaced by sheer drops into the darkness below. But even that faded after a while, the signal lost in the folds of the mountains. Just me, the engine's hum, and the relentless slap of water under the tires. It was rhythmic, almost hypnotic, lulling me into a false sense of security. No other cars out. Folks around here know better than to tempt fate on nights like this. The locals always say the hills come alive when the rain falls heavy, stirring up things best left buried. About an hour in, somewhere past the milepost 400 marker, the isolation really set in. The road twisted sharper, hemmed in by dense forest on both sides. Pines and hardwoods loomed like silent sentinels, their branches whipping in the wind. I'd driven this stretch 100 times, but tonight it felt different, oppressive, like the woods were pressing closer, watching. My aunt's stories echoed louder now. Tales of feral folks, people who'd gone wild after generations in isolation, living off the land like animals. Or the old Cherokee legends of spirits that wandered the ridges, drawing the unwary into the mist. I shook my head, gripping the wheel tighter. Superstition, that's all. But the hairs on my arms stood up anyway. It was around midnight when I first saw it. My clock glowed dimly on the dash, the only light besides the hazy beams cutting through the downpour. Up ahead, on the right shoulder, something caught in the headlights, a shape tall and humanoid, standing stock still amid the torrent. At first, I thought it was a deer or maybe a fallen branch, but no, it was upright, cloaked in shadow, unmoving as if the rain didn't touch it. My foot eased off the gas instinctively. Could be someone in trouble. I reasoned to break down a lost hiker soaked to the bone. These mountains are riddled with trails, and every year search parties pull folks out who wandered too far. I slowed to a crawl, wipers thumping back and forth, trying to get a better look. As I drew nearer, details emerged piecemeal through the blur. It was dressed in rags, maybe an old coat hanging limp and sodden, but the stance was wrong. Too rigid, like a statue planted there. No umbrella, no flashlight, just standing there facing the road, arms at its sides. I rolled down the window a crack, rain splattering in, and called out, "Hey, you all right? Need a ride?" My voice sounded thin, swallowed by the storm. No response, not even a twitch. Closer now, maybe 20 feet away, and that's when the unease turned to a knot in my gut. Where a face should be, There was nothing, just a void, a blackness deeper than the night around it. No eyes reflecting the lights, no features at all. It was like staring into an empty hood, but I could feel it staring back. My heart skipped. I honked the horn, a sharp blast that echoed off the trees, but it didn't flinch. Didn't move an inch. Panic bubbled up, hot and sudden. What the hell was this? Some drunk? A prank? But out here, in this weather? No. Something primal screamed at me to go, to floor it and not look back. I slammed the gear into drive, tires spinning on the wet pavement before catching traction. The truck lurched forward, and I glanced in the rear view as I accelerated. The figure was gone, vanished into the rain like it had never been there. My breath came in ragged gasps. Just your imagination, I muttered, but my hands shook on the wheel. The road ahead blurred further as the storm intensified, wind gusting hard enough to rock the cab. I pushed the speed up, hydroplaning around curves, the drop-offs yawning invisible to my right. Miles ticked by 5:10, but the adrenaline wouldn't fade. Every shadow in the woods seemed to shift. Every branch snap in the wind sounded like footsteps. I tried the radio again, desperate for company, but only static hissed back. Then, impossibly, there was again. My headlights swept around a bend, and the beam caught it, standing on a shoulder once more, closer this time, maybe 10 feet from the fog line. That same unnatural stillness, that faceless void. How? I'd been driving flat out. Nothing could have kept pace on foot, not through that terrain. Into the abyss. Rain hammered louder, thunder booming overhead like the mountains themselves were angry. My mind raced. Was it following me? Cutting through the woods. Knowing shortcuts only the wild things knew? Those feral stories my aunt told. People gone mad, faces hollowed by hunger, lurking in the underbrush. Or something older, a legend made flesh. I didn't want to know. Just had to get away. Another mile, and my lights dimmed briefly, alternator acting up in the wet, maybe. But in that flicker, I swore I saw movement behind me in the truck bed, a shadow shifting under the tarp I'd thrown over my gear. No, couldn't be. I craned my neck, but the rain obscured everything. Heart pounding in my ears, I scanned the mirrors obsessively. The road straightened for a stretch, and up ahead, blessedly, a faint glow pierced the gloom. An old gas station, the kind with rusted pumps and a flickering neon sign that read open, but probably hadn't seen a customer in hours. I veered into the lot, gravel crunching under tires, and skidded to a stop under the awning. Killed the engine, locked the doors, and hunkered down, breath fogging the windows. The station was deserted, no attendant in sight. The little shop dark and shuttered. Probably closed for the night, but at least it was shelter. Rain drummed on the metal roof overhead, a steady tattoo that should have been comforting but wasn't. I sat there, staring out into the blackness, waiting for my pulse to slow. Minutes dragged into what felt like hours. Thunder rolled distant now, the storm easing a touch, but in the quiet lulls between gusts, I heard it, footsteps, soft, squelching in the mud puddles pooling around the pumps. Not the patter of rain, deliberate, like boots slogging through the wet. I wiped the condensation from the window, peering out. Nothing visible, just shadows dancing in the wind. There was again, closer, circling the truck. A scrape against the fender, faint but unmistakable. My skin crawled. I clutched the steering wheel, knuckles white. "Who's there?" I whispered, voice barely audible over my heartbeat. No answer, just another step, then silence. I imagine it out there, that faceless thing pressing against the glass, waiting for me to crack the door. Hours passed like that. Me frozen in place, jumping at every creak and drip. Dawn crept in slow, gray light filtering through the clouds, the rain tapering to a drizzle. With the first real visibility, I scanned the lot. Muddy footprints trailed around the truck, large and bare, leading off into the woods beyond the pavement. No sign of anyone, but they were there, fresh as if made moments ago. I started the engine with trembling hands and peeled out, not stopping until I hit the interstate. Made it home by mid-morning, collapsed in a bed, but sleep wouldn't come. Told my wife about it later, then a buddy at work. They listened polite-like, but I saw the doubt in their eyes. Probably just a homeless guy, they said, or the storm playing tricks. Maybe, but I know what I saw, what I heard. That thing wasn't begging for help. It was hunting, patient and relentless. Now, I avoid those roads after dark, stick to the main highways even if it takes longer. But on rainy nights, when the wind howls through the eaves, I still hear those footsteps outside my window, squelching in the mud. And I wonder if it followed me all the way home, biding its time in the shadows, waiting for the next storm to call it out. The mountains keep their secrets close, you see. Folks disappear every year. Hikers, drivers, whole families sometimes. Search parties find nothing but echoes. My aunt called a few days later, asked if I'd made it okay. When I told her the story, her voice went quiet. "That's the Watcher," she said like it was fact. "Old tale from your grandpa's time. Stand by the road on stormy nights, draws you in. Some say it's a spirit, others a man gone feral after losing his kin to the hills. Either way, once it sees you, it don't forget." I hung up, but her words stuck. I've taken to leaving lights on at night, checking the locks twice. Sleep comes fitful, dreams filled with that void where a face should be. And sometimes in the quiet hours, I feel eyes on me from the tree lean behind the house. Watching, waiting. The rain brings it back, every time, and I know deep down it's not done with me yet. The Appalachians don't let go easy. They claim what's theirs, one rainy night at a time. Let's move to story 2. The rain had been falling since I clocked out at the mill, a steady curtain that turned the world gray and blurred the edges of everything. It was just past dusk when I started my drive home, the kind of evening in deep Appalachia where the mountains seemed to hunker down, heavy with secrets. I'd taken the back roads to avoid the flooded highways, those narrow, twisting lanes that snake through the valleys, flanked by pines so dense they swallow the light. My old Chevy pickup rattled along, its headlights carving weak tunnels through the thickening fog that rolled up from the hollows. The mill had kept me late, troubleshooting a busted conveyor, and now it was pushing 10 p.m., my eyes gritty from a 12-hour shift. All I wanted was a hot shower and my couch, but the weather had other plans. The roads out here aren't forgiving, especially in a storm. Potholes hide under sheets of water, and the gravel shoulders crumble into ditches if you stray too far. I kept my speed low, tires sloshing through mud, the wipers thumping a frantic rhythm that barely cleared the windshield. My phone's GPS was useless. Signal drops fast once you're past the last cell tower, and the screen just spun, searching for satellites. I relied on memory, following the curves I'd driven 100 times, though tonight they felt unfamiliar, like the land had shifted under the deluge. The radio hissed static, no station strong enough to break through the interference of the mountains. Just me, the rain's relentless drum on the roof, and the creak of my suspension over every dip. Around 1 a.m., I knew I'd screwed up. A fork in the road came up faster than I expected, half hidden by the fog, and I veered left out of habit. But the landmarks weren't right. No rusted mailbox, no crooked oak I used as a marker. The lane narrowed, trees crowding closer, their branches scraping the truck's sides like fingers testing for weakness. The fog was thicker now, a living thing that curled around the headlights, swallowing the beams before they reached 10 feet. My gut twisted. I'd taken a wrong turn, and these back roads could lead you deep into nowhere, places where even locals don't go after dark. I cursed under my breath, scanning for a spot to turn around, but the road was too tight, the ditches too deep. That's when I saw the lights. Faint at first, like fireflies caught in the mist, they flickered ahead, swaying gently as if carried by hand. Lanterns, maybe, or porch lights from some hidden farmhouse. Relief washed over me. Someone was out here, someone who could point me back to the main road. I eased the gas, following the glow, the truck lurching over ruts. The rain pounded harder, drowning out my thoughts, but those lights were a lifeline, steady in the chaos. I pictured a grizzled farmer in overalls, maybe offering coffee while I waited out the storm. The road dipped, then climbed, winding deeper into the woods, but I kept my eyes locked on the lights, letting them guide me. They vanished. 1 second they were there, bobbing just beyond the next curve, and then Nothing. Just fog and darkness, the headlights reflecting back like I'd driven into a void. I slammed on the brakes, tires skidding in the mud, my heart jumping to my throat. The truck fishtailed, stopping inches from a gnarled tree trunk. I sat there, gripping the wheel, breath hitching, scanning the gloom for any sign of the lights. Had I imagined them? No, they'd been real, too consistent, too deliberate to be a trick of the rain. I rolled down the window a crack, rain spattering my face, and strained to hear anything over the storm. A distant creak, like with settling, but no voices, no footsteps. Just the wind howling through the canopy. The engine chose that moment to betray me. It coughed, sputtered, then died with a pathetic whine, leaving me in silence broken only by the rain's tattoo. Water in the fuel lines, probably from all the puddles I plowed through. I popped the hood, grabbed my flashlight from the glove box, and stepped out, the mud sucking at my boots. The air was cold, heavy with the scent of wet earth and pine, and the fog pressed close, muffling the world. I fumbled under the hood, checking connections by touch, but my hands shook, not just from the chill. Something felt wrong, like the air itself was watching. I swept the flashlight across the trees, their trunks glistening black, and froze. Eyes glinted back, low to the ground, too many to count, vanishing when the beam lingered. I scrambled back into the cab, slamming the door and locking it, my pulse hammering. The flashlight stayed on, clutched like a weapon, though it felt useless against whatever was out there. The rustling started then, a low, deliberate sound. Not the wind, but something heavy moving through the underbrush, circling the truck. I held my breath, straining to pinpoint it. Left side, then behind, then right, like it was pacing, testing. My mind raced to the stories I'd heard growing up. Feral folk, driven mad by isolation, living like beasts in these hills. Or older tales, whispered by my grandma, of spirits that lure travelers off the path, leading them to cliffs or bogs. I told myself it was just animals, deer or coyotes spooked by the storm, but the rhythm was too human, too intentional. Hours dragged by, or maybe it was minutes. Time blurs when fear takes hold. I didn't dare try the engine again, afraid the noise would draw whatever was out there closer. The rain eased to a drizzle, but the fog stayed thick, wrapping the truck in a gray cocoon. I kept the flashlight off now, saving the battery, but my eyes darted to every shadow, every flicker in the mist. The rustling stopped, replaced by a deeper silence that was somehow worse. Then a new sound, a faint tapping like fingers brushing the rear bumper. I twisted in my seat, but the back window was fogged, showing nothing but smears of light. The tapping moved, slow and deliberate, along the passenger side. I leaned over, wiping the glass, and saw only mist. But the feeling of being watched grew heavier, like a weight on my chest. I don't know when I started whispering to myself, maybe to stay sane. Just wait for dawn, I repeated, voice barely audible. Nothing moves in the daylight, but the night stretched on, endless, the fog refusing to lift. At some point, exhaustion dulled the panic, my eyelids drooping despite myself. I snapped awake to a new sound, breathing, low and ragged, just outside the driver's door. Not animal, not quite human either, like air dragged through a throat clogged with dirt. I froze, every muscle locked, praying it hadn't heard my gasp. The breathing paused, then resumed, closer, as if something pressed its face to the window. I didn't look, couldn't. If I saw what was out there, I knew I'd lose it. Dawn came slowly, gray light seeping through the trees, the fog thinning just enough to reveal the world again. I forced myself to move, turning the key with a silent prayer. The engine coughed, then caught, roaring to life. I didn't hesitate, threw the truck into gear and peeled out, mud spraying, not caring if I hit a tree. The road was there, barely, leading me back towards civilization. But as the light grew, I saw where I'd stopped. A narrow ledge, the ground dropping away into a ravine just feet from my tires. I hadn't seen it in the dark, hadn't known how close I'd come to going over. My stomach churned. Those lights hadn't been guiding me to safety. They led me to the edge, deliberate as a trap. I made it home by mid-morning, the truck caked in mud, my hands still shaking as I unlocked my door. Collapsed on the couch, but sleep wouldn't come. Not with the memory of that breathing, those eyes in the dark. I told a coworker the next day, leaving out the worst parts, but even he looked uneasy. Folks see things out there, he said, especially on foggy nights. Old roads got a way of pulling you in. He mentioned the will-o'-the-wisp, lights that draw people off cliffs in the old stories. But I didn't need legends to explain what I'd felt. Something was out there, real and patient, waiting for the next lost soul to follow its glow. I drive the highways now, even if it takes longer. The back roads are off limits, especially when the rain falls and the fog rises. But some nights, when the mill lets out late and I'm alone in the parking lot, I catch a flicker in the distance, faint lights dancing in the tree lean, swaying like lanterns in the wind. I don't look long. I get in my truck, lock the doors, and drive straight home, checking the rear view the whole way. Because I know now, the mountains don't just hide things. They call to you, soft and sly. And once you answer, they don't let go. Whatever was out there that night, it saw me. It knows my scent. And on foggy nights, when the world turns gray, I feel it waiting just beyond the headlights, ready to lead me back to the edge. Let's move to story 3. I've always hated driving those mountain roads after dark, especially when the weather turns mean. The Blue Ridge can be beautiful in the daylight, all rolling hills and misty valleys. But at night, with rain coming down like the heavens cracked open, it feels like the land itself is trying to push you out. That particular run was supposed to be simple. Drop off a load of supplies to a little settlement called Pine Hollow, tucked way back where the pavement gives up and the gravel starts. Folks up there don't get out much, so they pay extra for late deliveries. I needed the money, so when the dispatcher asked if I'd take the midnight haul, I said yes before I thought it through. The storm hit about an hour outside of town, sudden and violent, the kind of downpour that makes the windshield look like a waterfall. My wipers couldn't keep up, and the headlights barely cut 20 feet ahead. Branches littered the road, and every now and then I'd have to ease around a fresh washout, tires spinning in the red clay mud. The radio had been spotty all evening, but around 11 it gave up completely. Just a low hiss of static that felt louder than music somehow. I clicked it off and rolled the window down an inch to let some air in, hoping the cold would keep me sharp. All I could hear was the drumming on the roof and the occasional groan of wind through the passes. That's when the whispering started. At first it was so faint I thought it was the wind threading through the cracked, weather stripping, a soft shush-shush like someone exhaling right against a glass. I ignored it, kept my eyes on the white line that kept disappearing under sheets of water. Then it changed, shaped itself into something almost like words. A low murmur, rising and falling with the gusts. Turn back. I shook my head, laughed at myself. 12 years hauling freight, and now I was jumping at wind noise. I reached over and cranked the heat higher, rubbed my eyes. Long day, that's all. But it didn't stop. The longer I drove, the clearer it got. Not alone. 2 words, soft as breath, spoken right beside my ear. I jerked so hard the wheel twitched and the trailer fishtailed before I caught it. My skin went cold despite the heater blasting. I told myself it was exhaustion, maybe the start of a migraine. I get them sometimes when I push too many hours. I swallowed hard and kept driving, knuckles white on the steering wheel. The voices multiplied. It wasn't one anymore. It was several, overlapping, some high and thin like a woman's, others low and rough like an old man clearing his throat. They weren't shouting. They never shouted. They just talked quiet and patient, the way neighbors do over a fence. They said my name, not the name on my license, my real name, the one my mama used when I was little and in trouble. They named the turns I'd just taken, Crowley Gap, Widow's Bend, like they'd been riding along the whole time. They knew I'd passed the abandoned church with the caved-in steeple 10 miles back. They knew I'd slowed down to look at the flowers that somebody still leaves there every Sunday. I started sweating even though the cab was freezing. My mouth went dry and my chest felt tight, like the air had thickened. I told myself to pull over, get out, walk around, anything to break the spell. But the shoulder was nothing but a slick drop-off in a blackness, and the thought of standing out in that rain with those voices still crawling around inside my skull was worse than staying put. So I kept driving, faster now, taking the curves too hot, praying the trailer wouldn't jackknife. I don't know how long it went on, minutes, maybe an hour. Time got slippery. The whispers never hurried. They just kept talking, arguing among themselves, sometimes like a family deciding what to do with me. He's tired. Let him rest. No, keep him moving. He'll listen if we're kind. The kind ones were the worst. Their gentleness felt like fingers sliding under my ribs. Then one voice, clearer than the rest, a little girl's voice, soft and sad, cut through the others. Don't look behind you, mister. Please don't look. I looked. I didn't mean to. My eyes flicked to the rearview mirror out of pure reflex, the same way you glance back when someone says not to. The cab was dark behind me, just a faint glow from the dash lights bleeding over the seat. But something shifted in the shadows back there, a slow settling, like a person adjusting their weight. Not a shape I could name, just a denser patch of dark that didn't belong. My breath stopped. The whispers went quiet all at once, as if they were listening to see what I'd do. I slammed the accelerator so hard the engine roared and the back end slid. The trailer whipped, tires screaming, and for a second I thought I was going over the edge. Somehow I kept it on the road, hydroplaning through a curve, water exploding up on both sides like I'd hit a lake. The voices came back softer now, almost disappointed. You looked. Oh, you looked. I drove like that for miles, reckless and shaking, tears mixing with the sweat on my face. I didn't slow down until the first scattered lights of Pine Hollow appeared through the rain, dim and yellow and real. The whispers thinned as the houses got closer, fading the way a radio station does when you crest a ridge. By the time I rolled into the gravel lot behind the general store, they were gone. Just the rain and my heartbeat and the tick of cooling metal. I sat there a long time, engine idling, afraid to shut it off. When I finally climbed out to unload, my legs barely held me. The store owner, Miss Arlene, took one look at my face and didn't ask questions. Just pour me coffee thick as tar and let me sit inside until the storm eased. I told her a little, not the worst of it, just that the roads had been bad and I'd gotten spooked. She nodded like she'd heard it before. Lots of folks hear things up on that stretch when the weather's angry, she said. Best not to answer back. I slept in the bunk behind the cab that night, doors locked, a hunting knife under the pillow. Didn't dream, or if I did, I don't remember. Made the return trip at dawn, sticking to the main highway, even though it added hours. Never took that Pine Hollow run again. Quit the late shifts altogether after a while. But the quiet ones followed me home. It's been 8 years, and most nights I'm fine. Then a hard rain starts, the kind that rattles the windows and drowns out the crickets, and I hear them again. Not loud, just a murmur under the sound of the water, like people talking in the next room. Sometimes it's only one voice, the little girl, asking why I looked when she begged me not to. Sometimes they say my name the way my mama did right before she passed, gentle and tired and sad. I never glance in the rear view anymore when it storms. I pull over, turn on every light in the cab, and wait it out with the radio blasting gospel or talk shows, anything with human voices. Because I know what's back there in the dark when the rain comes. I felt it settle the night. I looked, felt the seat dip under weight that had no right to be there. Whatever they are, lost souls, echoes, something the mountains keep, they ride with me now. Patient, waiting for the next storm strong enough to speak through. And every time the sky opens up, I wonder how many more rides they've got left in them before they ask me to pull over for good. Story 4. I still remember the smell of wet pine and creek mud that clung to my clothes when I left the lake that Sunday night. It had been a good weekend, quiet, just me and a couple of buddies casting lines into the misty water up near the North Carolina-Virginia line. We'd caught enough trout to brag about, drunk a few beers around the fire, and I'd headed out a little after 10, so I could make it home before the real rain hit. The forecast said scattered storms, nothing serious. The mountains don't read forecasts. By the time I turned off the parkway and started down the old state road that cuts through the little forgotten hollows, the sky had already torn itself open. Rain came sideways, hard enough to rattle the roof of my '98 Jeep Cherokee like buckshot. The wipers were on full blast and still losing the fight. Headlights barely reached 30 feet. turning the asphalt into a black mirror that threw my own beams back at me. Every curve felt blind. Every dip filled with rushing water that wanted to pull the tire sideways. I kept both hands on the wheel, leaned forward like an old man, and talked to the Jeep out loud the way you do when you're alone and nervous. "Come on, girl, just get us home." It happened without warning. 1 second the engine was growling steady. The next it coughed once, twice, then died like someone flipped a switch. I coasted to the narrowest patch of shoulder I could find, hazards blinking useless orange into the downpour. The sudden silence was worse than the thunder. Just the rain, the tick of cooling metal, and my own breathing. I sat there a minute, hoping it was vapor lock or something simple, then turned the key again. Nothing. Not even a click. Battery was fine. Lights still worked. Whatever it was had drowned or shorted out in the wet. I cursed, pulled my hood up, and climbed out to pop the hood. The rain soaked me in seconds, cold needles finding every gap in my jacket. Flashlight in my teeth, I poked around the engine bay, water streaming off my eyebrows. Couldn't see anything obvious. No loose wires, no steam, no smoke. Just a dead motor. Phone came next. No bars, of course. Out here the mountains eat signal for breakfast. I stood there getting drenched, weighing my options. Walk in this. Nearest house was miles back, and forward was worse. I decided to wait out in the Jeep, hope the storm eased or another vehicle came along. On a Sunday night in a deluge, that could be hours. Back inside, I locked the doors out of habit more than anything, cranked the heat even though the engine was cold, and tried to settle. The windows fogged fast. I wiped a circle on the driver's glass and stared out at the wall of water. That's when I noticed the trees weren't moving right. The wind was strong, sure, but whole sections of undergrowth were swaying against the gusts, like something big was pushing through. Not once or twice, steady, deliberate, left to, right along the tree line, maybe 40 feet off the road. I told myself it was a bear or deer spooked by the lightning. Things move weird in weather like this. Then came the tapping. Soft at first, almost polite. 3 light knocks on the rear passenger window, the way a friend might if they were trying not to scare you. Tap, tap, tap. I froze, every muscle locked. The hair on my arms lifted. I didn't turn around, just stared straight ahead and listened as the sound circled. Same rhythm, moving up the passenger side, pausing, then starting again at the driver's window right beside my head. Tap, 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 like fingernails but patient, not frantic. Whoever, or whatever, it was had all night. I forced myself to look. At first there was nothing but fog glass and my own pale reflection. I rubbed a bigger circle, breath shaking. That's when the hand appeared. Pale, too pale, pressed flat against the window from outside. Long fingers, knuckles bony, skin the color of something that never sees sun. It didn't slide or scratch. It just rested there, palm open like it was feeling the warmth inside. Another joined it on the passenger window, then a third on the windshield. No faces, no bodies I could see, just those hands, steady in the storm, leaving smears that weren't quite water. I don't know what sound I made, maybe nothing. My foot slammed the lock button again, even though it was already locked. The tapping stopped. For a long minute, there was only rain. I sat rigid, clutching the steering wheel like it could save me, praying for headlights, for anything human. Instead, I heard the howl. It started low, way back in the woods, rolling out like a wolf's cry, but wrong. Too long, too hollow, rising and falling in a way that hurt behind my eyes. Another answered it, closer, then a third from the opposite side of the road. Not animals. I've heard coyotes, bears, panthers even. Nothing sound like that. It felt like mourning or warning or both. Time crawled. I kept the dome light on, flashlight in my lap pointed at the floorboards, afraid to shine it outside and see what might look back. Every few minutes the hands would return, pressing gently, exploring the glass like they were learning the shape of the Jeep, learning me. Once, something heavy settled on the roof. Metal groaned under weight that shifted slowly from back to front, then was gone. Water dripped through the old weather stripping near the rear hatch, but I swear some of the drops smelled like wet earth and decay. Hours. It felt like days. The rain never let up, just shifted from torrent to steady roar. My phone battery died somewhere around 3, plunging me into just the weak glow of the dash. I started nodding off despite myself, jerking awake every time a new sound came. Branches snapping too close, a low grunt that might have been wind. At one point, I thought I heard my name, spoken soft and drawn out, the way my grandpa used to call me in from playing when I was little. That one almost broke me. Headlights finally saved me. They came from behind, slow, high off the ground, a semi creeping through the mess. I flashed my hazards, waved the flashlight out the window like a lunatic. The driver must have seen the desperation because he pulled over, air brakes hissing. Big guy, beard, Carhartt jacket soaked through. He hooked up cables without asking many questions, just kept looking at the tree lean like he didn't want his back to it. While the battery charged, he leaned close and spoke low. "You alone out here?" I nodded, throat raw. "Good. Keep it that way." He glanced at my fogged windows, at the faint handprints still visible in the smears. Folks break down on this stretch sometimes. Next morning we find the car, doors open, keys still in it. No blood, no struggle. Just gone, like they walked off into the trees, and the trees walked them deeper. He paused, rain dripping off his brim. "Whatever's out there tonight, it's hungry. Storm brings them close." The Jeep started on the third try. I thanked him over and over, offered money. He waved it off. Just told me to drive and not stop till I hit pavement with streetlights. I did. Never looked back until I was 20 miles down the road, tires humming on dry asphalt, dawn just starting to bruise the horizon purple. The handprints were still there when I parked in my driveway. Not water, something thicker, greasier. They didn't wash off with soap or Windex. Had to use rubbing alcohol and a scrub brush till my arm ached. Even then, faint outlines stayed for weeks like the glass remembered. I don't fish that lake anymore. Don't drive those back roads after dark, no matter the shortcut. But when the rain comes hard and the wind rattles the gutters, I still check the locks twice. And sometimes, just for a second, I catch a pale blur in the reflection of the kitchen window, fingers spread like they're measuring the glass between us, waiting for the next storm strong enough to blur the line. Because whatever touched my Jeep that night didn't follow me home to leave. It followed me home to learn where I live. Story 5. I left my Aunt Ruth's place later than I should have. She'd kept me talking on the porch long after supper, the way old mountain women do when they sense you're about to slip out of their reach for a while. The coffee had gone cold, the moon was already high, and the first fat drops were ticking on the tin roof when I finally hugged her goodbye. "Mind the road, baby," she said, pressing a paper sack of cornbread and a jar of blackberry jam into my hands like talismans. "Rain's coming in angry tonight." I laughed it off, told her I'd driven these hills drunker and darker than this. She didn't smile back, just watched me climb into the truck with those pale eyes that always looked like they'd seen tomorrow already. The storm caught me halfway down the ridge. One minute the road was wet, but manageable. The next it was a river. Water sheeted across the windshield faster than the wipers could throw it off, and every curve felt like Russian roulette. My headlights carved pale tunnels through the dark, but the dark pushed right back, thick and alive. I eased off the gas, leaned forward, and tried to remember how many miles until the county road widened out. Too many. Always too many when the weather turns mean. That's when the feeling started, a prickling at the back of my neck, the kind you get when somebody's staring at the soft spot between your shoulder blades. I told myself it was nothing, just the loneliness of the drive, the way the mountains close in and make you feel small. But the feeling grew, steady and patient, until I couldn't ignore it anymore. I glanced at the woods sliding by on both sides and saw the first pair of eyes. They caught the headlights like polished glass. Low at first, then higher, about chest height on a man. Deer, I thought. Has to be deer. Except deer don't stand still in a downpour, staring at passing trucks. Deer bolt. These didn't. They just watched, unblinking, reflecting the light in perfect circles that never wavered. I eased past, and the eyes slipped behind the curtain of rain. But two more pairs took their place a dozen yards farther on. Same height, same stillness. I picked up speed. The road was slick, but panic was louder than caution. More eyes appeared. 3 pairs for 6, glowing softly along the tree line like someone had strung Christmas lights in hell. They weren't running parallel the way animals do. They were pacing me. Every time I rounded a bend, new ones were already waiting, as if they knew the road better than I did. My mouth went dry. My hands locked at 10 and 2 until my knuckles ached. I tried the radio for comfort, but all I got was static that hissed like a warning. The gravel started crunching behind me. Not tires, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, matching my speed exactly. I checked the mirror and saw nothing but rain and darkness, yet the sound kept time with the engine. Crunch, slide, crunch, slide. Something walking on the shoulder just outside the reach of my taillights. Human gait, but heavier, like bare feet or something close to it. I floored it. The truck fishtailed, caught traction, and shot forward. The footsteps didn't speed up. They just kept coming, patient as death. I risked another glance into the woods and saw shapes now. Tall, thin silhouettes slipping between the trunks, always half hidden by leaves and water. Shoulders too narrow, limbs too long, moving in a way that hurt to watch, like joints bending wrong. They never crossed into the open, never let the headlights land full on them. Just darted from shadow to shadow, keeping pace, keeping watch. The eyes never blinked. Dozens now, stretching ahead as far as the rain allowed me to see, a living fence guiding me deeper into mountains. The road narrowed, trees leaning overhead until it felt like driving through a tunnel of wet bark and needles. My breath fogged the windshield. I wiped it clear with a shaking sleeve and saw the curve too late. Tires lost the pavement, hydroplaned, and the world tilted. For 1/6 second, I was weightless, staring down a drop-off blacker than the sky. I jerked the wheel, felt the rear end swing, and somehow the truck grabbed gravel again. I slammed the brakes and slid into an old pullout I didn't even know was there. A wide spot where loggers used to turn around decades ago, now just a scar of red clay ringed by pines. I killed the engine and sat shaking, rain drumming so hard it sounded like the roof might cave. The headlights stayed on, cutting 2 white tunnels into the dark, and the eyes closed in. They came from every direction, stepping into the edge of the beams, 1 pair at a time, until I was surrounded. 30, 40 pairs, maybe more, glowing soft and steady. No growls, no breathing I could hear over the storm, just that awful silence underneath the rain. They stood just past where the light gave out, shoulders hunched against the downpour, heads tilted like they were studying me the way a child studies a bug in a jar. I couldn't see faces, only the suggestion of them, hollows where eyes should be, skin the color of river stone. Some were taller, some shorter, all thin and wrong-angled. They didn't move closer, didn't move away. Just watched. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Minutes. Hours. Time lost meaning. My phone was dead, the cab growing colder by the minute. I kept waiting for them to rush the truck, to smash the windows or drag me out, but they never did. It was worse than violence. It was curiosity, like I was the first new thing they'd seen in years, and they wanted to memorize me before deciding what came next. I started talking low, crazy, the way you do when you're alone and terrified. Told them about my aunt's cornbread still warm in the seat beside me, about my dog waiting on the porch back home, about anything that felt human. My voice cracked and echoed inside the cab, sounding small and pitiful. The eyes didn't blink. One of the taller shapes lifted a hand, slow, deliberate, palm up like it was asking for something. The fingers were too long, joints bending in places joints don't bend. I stopped talking. Eventually the rain began to ease, turning from roar to whisper. The sky behind the ridges went from black to bruised gray, and one by one, the eyes winked out, not all at once. They simply backed away, melting into the trees until only a handful remained. The last pair lingered longest, standing right at the edge of the headlight beams. I swear they tilted forward, like they were memorizing the shape of my face through the windshield. Then they were gone too, and the woods were just woods again, dripping and empty. I started the truck with fingers that barely worked and drove out of there slow, half expecting them to pour back into the road. They didn't. By the time I hit the county line, the sun was up, weak and watery, and the world looked normal. I told myself it was over. It's never over. Some nights when the rain comes hard and I have to drive those same hills, I feel them again. That prickling on my neck, that sense of being measured. I keep my eyes on the road now. Never check the tree line, never slow down. Because I know what they were doing out there in the dark. They weren't hunting. They were learning. Learning the sound of my engine, the shape of my truck, the route I take when I leave my aunt's house late. One of these storms, they won't just watch. One of these nights, they'll step all the way into the light and finish what they started. And when that night comes, I'm afraid I'll pull over without meaning to. Because part of me, some small, sick part, still wonders what they wanted to see when they looked at me so long and so quiet. And I'm terrified the answer is already waiting behind my eyes every time I blink. Story 6. I've never liked driving the old ridge road at night, especially when the weather turns ugly. But that Thursday, I didn't have much choice. My sister called for Knoxville saying Mama was back in a hospital, and I'd thrown a bag in the truck and left Roanoke the minute I hung up. By the time I crossed into North Carolina, the sky had gone black and mean, and the rain started falling so hard it felt personal. Lightning stitched the clouds, showing me glimpses of wet rock walls and pine trees, bent almost double. I kept the radio off. The only sound was water hishing under the tires and the occasional groan of the wipers trying to keep up. Around 1 in the morning, somewhere past the little dot on the map called Elk Valley, my headlights caught something that didn't belong. A car on the shoulder, driver's door hanging open, interior light glowing weak like a dying candle. An old tan station wagon, maybe late 90s, the kind every family had back then. No hazard lights, no brake lights, just sitting there like it had rolled to a stop and given up. In this kind of storm, nobody leaves a car like that unless something's bad wrong. I eased off the gas, heart already thumping harder than it should, and pulled in behind it. The rain hit me like ice water the second I stepped out. I left my truck running, headlights on, and walked up slow, boots slipping on the gravel. Hey, anybody hurt? My voice got swallowed by the wind. The driver's seat was empty. Passenger seat too. Papers were scattered across the dash and floorboard. Maps, receipts, a couple of juice boxes tipped on their sides. On the back seat sat a single plastic dinosaur, the kind with the little copyright stamp on its belly, lying on its side like it had been dropped mid-roar. Something coppery hung in the air, faint but unmistakable under the smell of wet vinyl. Not strong enough to be fresh blood, more like pennies left out in the rain for years. I called again, louder, shining my flashlight into the tree line. Nothing came back but thunder and the slap of branches. The rear hatch was cracked open an inch. I pulled it wider and saw the usual mess. Blankets, a cooler, a couple of kid-sized life jackets. No luggage, no bodies, no signs of fight. Just gone. I stood there getting soaked to the bone, trying to decide whether to leave a note or take a picture of the plate for the sheriff. That's when the hair on my arms stood up. It felt like the forest itself was holding its breath. I jogged back to my truck, slammed the door, and reached for my phone. No signal, of course. I remember staring at the station wagon in my mirror, its open door swaying a little in the wind, and telling myself to calm down. People break down. People walk for help. Happens all the time. I shifted into drive and rolled forward slow, meaning to go another mile or two and flag the first house with a light on. The headlights behind me came on. Not mine, the station wagon's. 2 weak yellow beams flicked to life, dim like the battery was almost dead, then steadied. I felt my stomach drop straight through the floorboard. My foot hit the brake hard enough to lock the tires. In the mirror, I watched the wagon's door ease shut by itself, slow and deliberate, like someone inside had reached across and pulled it. Then it just sat there, headlights staring at me through the rain. I floored it. The road was a nightmare of switchbacks and washouts, but I took them fast, tires squealing, praying I didn't sail off into empty air. Every few seconds, I checked the mirror. Nothing but darkness and water. After 5 miles, I let myself breathe. Just imagination, I told myself. Lightning playing tricks. Old car shorted out, that's all. Then the headlights appeared again, farther up the road, waiting for me around the next bend. I almost put the truck in the ditch. There was parked dead center in my lane, lights off now, like it had passed me somehow, like it knew every shortcut these mountains hide. I swerve hard, gravel spitting, and shot past it close enough to see the empty seats through the side window. No driver, no passengers, just a little plastic dinosaur still lying on its side. I didn't slow down again. The engine behind me started a minute later, low, throaty, wrong for that old wagon. It came up fast, no lights at all, just a growl closing the gap. I couldn't see it, but I could hear it riding my bumper, engine note rising and falling like something breathing hard. I weaved left, right, trying to lose it on the curves, but every time I glanced back, the sound was closer, hungrier. The old iron bridge came up sudden. One lane, rusted rails, board slick as ice. I stood on the brakes and skidded to a stop inches from the edge. The roar behind me kept coming. I braced for the impact, felt my truck lurch hard as something slammed into the tailgate. Metal screamed. My head snapped back against the rest. Then silence, just rain and my heartbeat and the faint creak of the bridge swaying under my tires. I sat there shaking, waiting for another hit. None came. After a minute, I forced myself to look. Nothing behind me but wet asphalt and darkness. No station wagon, no headlights, no sign anything had ever been there except two fresh dents in my bumper shaped like the grill of an old Ford. Deep clean, impossible. I limped the truck the last 20 miles to the hospital, pulled into the ER lot as the sky was turning gray. Told the deputy what I could without sounding insane. He ran the plate I'd memorized. Car belonged to a family of 4 out of Johnson City. Mom, dad, 2 little boys. Disappeared 7 years ago, almost to the day. Searchers found the wagon right where I'd first seen it. Doors open, engine cold. No tracks leading away, no blood, no bodies. Just a dinosaur on the back seat and a half-eaten pack of peanut butter crackers. Case went cold. Folks said they must have been washed into a ravine, but no one ever found a thing. I still drive that ridge sometimes. Have to if I want to visit Mama. I take it slow now. Keep the high beams on no matter who flashes me. Most nights it's fine. But when the rain comes hard and the fog sits low in the hollows, I start watching for a tan station wagon with one taillight cracked and a little plastic dinosaur riding shotgun. Sometimes I see it waiting up ahead, lights off, patient. Sometimes I hear the engine behind me, running dark, matching my speed like it's done this 1,000 times before. And every time the storm gets bad enough, I feel the dents in my bumper throb like fresh bruises and wonder if tonight's the night it finally catches up for good. Because whatever took that family didn't die with them. It just waits for the next set of headlights, lonely enough, scared enough, kind enough to stop. And when the rain is loud and the road is empty, it remembers how to drive. Story 7. I was 26 the night. I picked her up, running late after a long shift at the brewery in Asheville and cutting across the Blue Ridge Parkway to shave an hour off the drive to my folks' place in Boone. The storm came in faster than the forecast ever warned. Rain so thick the high beams felt useless. Just 2 cones of mist and water that never quite reached the road. I had the windows cracked an inch so the cab wouldn't fog, and every gust shoved cold, wet air across my face. The radio had given up somewhere around Little Switzerland. All I had for company was the slap of the wipers and the low growl of the engine. I saw her at the edge of the light, standing on the white line like she belonged there. One arm out, thumb up, the other hugging herself against the wind. A woman, maybe 30, soaked through, dark hair plastered to her cheeks. No pack, no flashlight, nothing you'd expect from someone hiking the parkway after dark. Just a thin coat that used to be tan and a dress that clung to her legs like wet paper. I eased off the gas without really deciding to. Something about the way she stood, shoulders curved in, head bowed, looked like surrender. I know that posture. I've worn it myself after too many bad nights. I rolled to a stop beside her. She didn't move right away. Just stared at the passenger window, rain streaming off her chin. I reached across and pushed the door open. "Come on, you're freezing," I called over the storm. She climbed in slow, like her joints hurt, and pulled the door shut behind her. Water pooled on the seat and ran off her coat in steady drips. The smell hit me then, not just wet wool, but something older underneath. Damp earth, leaf mold, the sweet rot scent of creek banks after a flood. She sat straight, hands folded in her lap, staring through the windshield. "You okay?" I asked. My voice sounded too loud in the quiet cab. She nodded once, small. "Just up the road," she whispered. Her voice was soft, almost lost under the rain, like wind moving through dry leaves long after the tree is dead. I asked where exactly, but she only repeated it, "Just up the road," and settled back against the seat. I figured she was in shock, maybe running from somebody. Happens more than people think in these hills. I pulled back onto the pavement and kept my speed gentle. The road was a mess, and I didn't want to scare her more. We drove in silence for a mile, maybe two. Every now and then lightning flashed and lit her profile. Sharp cheekbones, skin pale enough to glow, eyes too dark, no reflection in them at all. Water kept dripping from her hair, but the puddle under her wasn't growing the way it should. I offered my jacket from the back seat. She didn't take it, just stared ahead, lips barely moving, like she was counting mile markers only she could see. Then she started talking. Not to me, not really. More like remembering out loud. "It was a night like this," she said, voice still soft, still rustling. "He was driving too fast. Said we'd make it home before the worst of it. Kids were asleep in the back." She paused, fingers tightening in her lap. Curve came up sudden. Guardrail gave. Another pause, longer. Water was high that spring. I swallowed. The road we were on twisted the same way she described. Sharp drop on the right, creek running loud and black far below. I eased off the gas a little more. "I'm sorry," I said, "because what else do you say?" She turned then and looked at me full on. Her eyes weren't just dark. They were empty, deep as sinkholes. "It don't hurt anymore," she said, almost gentle. "Just cold. Always cold." The temperature in the cab dropped, so fast my breath fogged. The heater was blowing warm. I could feel it on my knuckles, but the air around her felt like February creek water. We rounded the next bend, and she straightened. "Here," she said, clear as a bell. "This is it." There was nothing special about the spot. Just another curve, a narrow pull-off, a wooden cross half rotted into the bank, plastic flowers faded gray. I started to slow, meaning to let her out, but the seat beside me was empty. No water on the upholstery, no wet prints on the floor mat, no smell. Just a faint depression in the cushion where she'd been, already springing back. I slammed the brakes and pulled over hard, gravel peppering the wheel wells. The dome light showed nothing. I got out, walked around the truck, shining my phone flashlight like an idiot, calling "Ma'am," into the rain. Only thunder answered. The cross had a name I couldn't read anymore, just dates, 1997 to 2018. A small plaque underneath, too weather-worn to make out, except for the word "beloved." I stood there getting soaked again, heart hammering against my ribs, telling myself it was a prank, exhaustion, anything but what it felt like. I drove the rest of the way home white-knuckled, windows down so the cold would keep me awake. Told myself I'd imagine the whole thing. Told myself a lot of things. 3 days later, I found the first scratch. It was inside the passenger door panel, for parallel lines about an inch long, gouged deep like fingernails dragged down in panic. I thought maybe a branch had whipped the window when I had it cracked. Kept washing the truck, kept checking. More appeared. Inside the headliner, along the seat belt, even on the underside of the visor where no branch could ever reach. Always 4 lines, always fresh, always on the passenger side, and always when it rained. I looked up the crash after that. Took some digging, but the library in Boone had microfiche of the local paper. April 2018, single car accident, guardrail failure, vehicle over embankment into Little Laurel Creek. Driver and 2 children pronounced at scene. Passenger, female, 31, missing, presumed swept downstream. Her name was Clara. The article had a picture from happier days. Dark hair, sharp cheekbones, eyes that even in newsprint looked too deep. I stopped driving the parkway at night. Took the long way around on 221 no matter how tired I was. Sold that truck 6 months later when the scratches started showing up on the inside of the windshield. Faint at first, then deeper like something on the passenger side kept trying to dig its way out. Buyer never said a word about them. Maybe they faded. Maybe he just didn't look close. But every time the rain sets in hard and the wind screams down off the ridges, I feel the seat beside me go cold. I'll be sitting on my couch or lying in bed, and the air will shift, just for a second, like someone sat down heavy and soaked and waiting. Sometimes I hear her voice, soft as leaves skittering across pavement, just up the road. I'll leave the porch light on now when storms come. I don't know if it helps. I think she's still trying to get home, still looking for someone kind enough to stop on a bad night. And every time thunder rolls through the hollow, I wonder if tonight's the night another pair of headlights slows for a woman with dark hair and empty eyes, and whether the passenger seat in some other truck has already started to scratch. Story 8. I never should have taken that shortcut. Everyone who grows up in these mountains knows better than to trust the old logging roads when the rain comes in hard. But I was bone tired, running on coffee and spite after a 12-hour shift at the plant in Silva, and the thought of another hour on the parkway made my skin crawl. So I turned off 74 onto what the locals still call Rattler Creek Road, a narrow strip of cracked asphalt that climbs and twists through some of the thickest laurel hells in Jackson County. The rain was already hammering when I made the turn, the kind of rain that feels like the sky's trying to scrub the mountains clean. My headlights barely cut 20 feet, and every curve was a gamble. Around midnight, the feeling started. That prickling that says you're being watched. I glanced in the rear view and saw them. Two white eyes floating high in the dark, closer than any vehicle had a right to be on night like this. High beams on full, blinding whenever they hit the straight stretch. I eased off the gas, moved as far right as the shoulder allowed, expecting them to blow past. They didn't. They slowed too, hanging maybe 10 feet off my bumper, riding the center line like they owned it. I couldn't see a plate, just spray and glare. My stomach tightened. Out here, you don't tailgate strangers. It's how feuds start. I sped up. They matched me. I slowed again, almost to a crawl. They crept closer until the light filled the cab, and I could feel the heat of their bulbs on the back of my neck. Then the bump came, solid, deliberate, hard enough to snap my head forward and set the coffee in my cup holder sloshing over my hand. My truck lurched. I cursed and floored it, tires spinning before they bit. Another bump, harder. The second one rattled my teeth. Panic took the wheel. I jerked left onto the first break in the trees I saw, an old fire road I'd hunted as a kid, half swallowed by rhododendron. Branches whipped the doors and screeched across the roof like claws. I figured no sane person would follow me in here. They followed. I heard the engine behind me drop in a low gear, a throaty growl that didn't sound like any truck I knew, more animal than machine. The road narrowed, mud sucking at the tires, water rushing in the ruts. My phone showed no bars, hadn't since I left the highway. I was on my own. The trees closed overhead until it felt like driving through a tunnel. Every few seconds, the high beams behind me lit the bark red and wet, then vanished when the road twisted. I kept waiting to bottom out or hit a washout, but the pursuer never fell back. If anything, it gained. I caught glimpses in the mirror. A dark shape, taller than a pickup should be, no visible cab lights, no silhouette behind the wheel. Just those blinding eyes and a grill that looked too wide, too high, like something that belonged on a logging skidder, not a road. I don't know how long we played that game, minutes, maybe 20, time stretches when your heart's in your throat. The road finally spat me out into a clearing I remembered, an old landing where they used to stack timber back in the 80s, ringed by poplars and a wall of laurel so thick you couldn't see daylight through in summer. A dead end, chain and a faded forestry sign blocked the far side. I had nowhere left to go. I skidded to a stop sideways, killed the engine, and sat there shaking while the rain drummed the roof like it wanted in. The pursuer rolled up behind me and stopped, lights still blazing into my mirrors, engine idling rough and low. I grabbed the mag light from under the seat, heavy enough to hurt somebody if it came to that, and waited for doors to open, for voices, anything human. Nothing happened. Just the rain and that idle, patient and hungry. Minutes dragged. My breath fogged the windows. Finally, I heard it. Two doors creaking open, slow, the sound of rusted hinges fighting the wet. Boots hit the mud, heavy, deliberate. I counted 4 distinct thuds. Then silence again, except for the rain. No talking, no shouting, no hurry. I cracked my door an inch, flashlight ready, and listened. Water poured off the roof in sheets. Somewhere out there, 4 sets of feet were moving, spreading out. I don't know what made me get out. Stupidity, probably, or the need to see what was hunting me. I stepped into the downpour, boots sinking ankle deep, and walked toward the lights. The beam of my flashlight shook across the clearing. The vehicle sat there, an old 70s Ford, maybe lifted high on mud tires, paint long gone to rust and primer. Engine still running, doors yawning open. Empty. No steam from the seats, no wet prints on the pedals. Just dark inside, darker than it should have been. I swept the light across the ground. 4 sets of tracks led away from the doors, deep and wide, barefoot or close to it, heading straight into the laurel thicket. Fresh, edges sharp, filling slowly with water. Whatever made them was big. I followed the beams of the abandoned truck. They pointed at my tailgate like an accusation. That's when my own engine refused to turn over. Not even a click. Battery was good. Had been 5 minutes ago. Dead as stone. I ran back, threw myself inside, and locked the doors, heart hammering so hard I thought it would crack a rib. The clearing went quiet except for the rain. Then the steps started again, circling, slow, splashing through the mud just outside the reach of the headlights. Once, twice, 3 times around the truck. Breathing came with them, heavy, wet, excited. Not winded, just eager. Every now and then a palm would slap the glass, testing, leaving a smeared print that slid down slow like it had all night. I sat in the dark with the flashlight off to save the battery, knees to my chest, counting heartbeats. The circling never sped up, never slowed. It was patient the way deep water is patient. Hours passed, or felt like it. The rain eased from roar to whisper. Toward dawn, the steps faded into the woods, and the old Ford's engine finally coughed itself quiet. When the first gray light finally leaked through the trees, the clearing was empty. No truck, no footprints leading away, only a perfect set of tire tracks circling mine 3 times like a dog turning before it lies down. My truck started on the first try. I limped out of there as the sun came up weak behind clouds. Told the sheriff what I could. He listened polite, wrote nothing down, and said kids joyride those roads all the time. I didn't argue. Just went home, shower until the hot water ran out, and try to forget. I never took Rattler Creek Road again. But some nights when the rain sets in hard and I'm driving home late, I catch a glimpse in the mirror. High beams riding too close, too patient. No plate, no driver behind the wheel. And no matter how fast I go, no matter which turn I take, the distance never grows. Sometimes I swear I hear the engine note change, drop in a low, ready to follow me wherever I run. The mountains don't always kill what they chase. Sometimes they just like to remind you who the road really belongs to. Story 9. I still drive for a living, hauling gravel and fill dirt out of the quarries around Irwin, Tennessee. Most nights, it's just me, the low rumble of the diesel, and whatever's playing on the satellite radio. But every now and then the weather turns ugly and the mountains remember who they belong to. That night was one of the ugly ones. The storm rolled in off the Nolichucky like a freight train. Rain so thick it felt like driving through a car wash with the windows down. I finished a late drop in Burnsville and was cutting back on 19W, the two-lane that hugs the river gorge. Visibility was maybe 20 feet, wipers on full blast, and still losing. I had the headlights on bright, fog lights too, but everything beyond the hood was just gray water and black trees. That's when the impact came. It wasn't a deer. Deer hit hard and loud, metal twists, glass shatters, something thumps and stays thumped. This was different. A single dull thud against the driver's side rear wheel, like the truck had rolled over a log that wasn't there a second earlier. The whole rig shuddered, tires chirped, and I stood on the brakes. The trailer jackknifed it a little before I caught it, skidding to a crooked stop on the narrow shoulder with the river roaring somewhere below the guardrail. I sat there a second, heart hammering, waiting for steam or the smell of blood or anything normal. Nothing. Just the rain, suddenly quieter than it had any right to be. I've been through plenty of storms in these hills. The noise never just quits like that. It felt like someone turned the volume knob on the world down to 2. I grabbed the mag light, pulled my hood up, and stepped out. The beam cut a shaky tunnel through the downpour. I walked the length of the truck, checking for fur, for dents, for anything. The fender was clean, tires intact, nothing hanging off the undercarriage. I swept the light across the road behind me. No body, no drag marks, not even a scuff on the asphalt. Just wet pavement and darkness. The rain kept falling, but the sound of it was muffled, far away, like I was hearing it through cotton. I shouted once, "Hello," and my own voice came back flat and small. Back inside the cab, I expected the usual roar to return the second I shut the door. It didn't. The rain was still there, drumming the roof, but soft now, almost polite. The radio hissed static no matter what station I tried. I told myself it was shock, adrenaline messing with my ears, and put the truck in gear. That's when the scraping started. It came from underneath, slow and deliberate, metal on metal, like something long and thin dragging itself the length of the chassis. Not constant, just every few seconds, pause, drag, patient as a heartbeat. I floored it. The scraping kept perfect time, neither faster nor slower, like whatever made it had matched my speed without effort. I drove another mile before I couldn't take it anymore and pulled into an old gravel maybe the loggers used to use. Killed the engine, climbed out, and got on my knees in the mud with a flashlight. Nothing under the truck. No branches, no chain, no animal caught in the axle. Just dripping oil and water and those same faint parallel scratches along the frame rail, fresh, shiny, for lines about 2 feet long. I'd never seen them before. Back in the cab, the silence pressed closer. The rain sounded like it was falling on a different planet. Then the whispers started. At first, I thought it was wind threading through the antenna, but the shapes were too clear, low, overlapping, some high and thin, others gravel deep. Not words I could catch, just tone, pleading, arguing, comforting all at once. They came from everywhere and nowhere, inside the cab, inside my head. I cranked the radio volume until the speakers buzzed. The whispers stayed right there underneath it, patient. The truck felt heavier, not sluggish. Heavy, like the suspension had sagged under extra weight I couldn't see. I glanced in the side mirror and saw the roof dent in slow, for distinct spots pressing down as if invisible hands were testing how much give the metal had. Another set appeared, then another, walking from back to front like passengers shifting seats. I floored it again. 10 miles of blind curves, and I never slowed. The scraping never stopped. The whispers never rose above a murmur. And every time I looked, the roof carried more shallow handprints. By the time the glow of the Citgo at the edge of Irwin appeared through the rain, the metal above me looked like something had danced on it barefoot. I pulled under the canopy hard enough to splash water over the pumps. The night attendant, a kid named Corey I'd known since high school, stepped out wiping his hands on a rag. He took one look at my face, then at the roof of the cab, and went pale under the fluorescent lights. "You hit one of them," he said, voice flat. I laughed, too loud, too brittle. "Hit what?" There wasn't anything there. Corey just shook his head. "My papa used to drive coal out of Kentucky. Same thing happened to him outside Prestonsburg 30 years ago. Said he felt the thud, heard the quiet come down, and knew he'd picked up a rider. They latch on when something gets struck on these roads. Doesn't matter if you see a body or not. Ride the roof till they decide you've carried him far enough." He glanced at the handprints again. He made it to a church parking lot with the lights on. Said they left when the rain stopped. Most folks ain't that lucky. I looked up. In the harsh station light, the dents were worse. Dozens of them, some overlapping, all the size of adult palms. A few had started to crease inward where fingers would curl. Corey wouldn't come any closer. Just filled my tank from the far pump and took my card without a word. I drove home with every light in the cab on, radio blasting gospel so loud the speakers crackled. The scraping stopped the minute I crossed the city limits, like a switch flipped. The whispers faded with it. By the time I parked behind my trailer, the rain had turned to mist, and the roof looked almost normal again. Just faint shadows if you knew where to look. I sold the truck the next week. Told the buyer the dents were from hail. He didn't argue. But the quiet comes back sometimes. Always when I'm driving alone and the rain starts falling soft. The radio will cut out for half a second, and in that gap, I hear them settling in again, patient, waiting for the next stretch of dark road where the world goes still. Some nights I pull over under a streetlight and sit with the engine running till dawn, afraid to look at the roof, afraid of what might be looking back. Because I never found what I hit. And whatever it was, it never really got off. Story 10. The rain started before I even left Johnson City. Soft at first, then harder, the kind that makes the wipers sound like they're pleading. I was headed to my brother's place up near Roan Mountain for his little girl's birthday the next day, and I'd promised I'd be there no matter what. The clock on the dash read 11:47 when I turned off 19E onto the back road that cuts through the state forest. Locals call it the Old Hampton Road, but nobody uses it much anymore except hunters and people like me who are too stubborn to add an extra hour going the safe way. I had the radio low, some old Hank Jr. song crackling in and out, and the coffee in my thermos had gone cold an hour earlier. The storm thickened fast. Sheets of water blurred the headlights into useless halos, and the center line disappeared under rivers of red clay runoff. I eased down to 30, sometimes 20, leaning forward like an old woman, both hands locked on the wheel. Every curve felt blind, every dip a gamble. I was telling myself just another 20 miles, just keep it between the ditches when the shape stepped into the road. It wasn't a deer. Deer freeze, eyes wide, then bolt. This thing walked, slow and deliberate, upright, shoulders hunched against the rain. Tall 6'5", maybe taller, arms too long, swaying like it was hurt or drunk. My foot was already on the brake, but the distance closed faster than I expected. I jerked the wheel hard right, felt the tires let go, and the world tilted. The car slid sideways, gravel peppering the undercarriage, and came to rest half in the ditch, nose pointed back the way I'd come. The headlights cut across empty road. Whatever I'd seen was gone. I sat there breathing hard, waiting for my heart to slow, waiting for reason to kick in. Drunk, I told myself. Some poor fool walking home from a bar that didn't exist out here. I grabbed the Big Mag light from under the seat, pulled my cap low, and climbed out. The rain hit like ice water, soaking me in seconds. I walked the beam across the asphalt. No blood, no fur, no shoe prints even, just one long smear of mud starting where the thing had been and trailing off into the trees on the left side of the road. Thick, dark mud, the kind that comes from deep in the laurel slicks where the sun never reaches. I don't know why I followed it. I tell myself now it was to make sure nobody was hurt, but that's only half true. Something in me needed to see. The trail was fresh, wide, like whatever made it dragged its feet. The flashlight shook in my hand, cutting tunnels through the downpour. 10 yards in, the road noise faded behind the rain, and the trees closed overhead. The mud prints kept going, deeper into the brush, spacing uneven, sometimes sliding like the thing had stumbled. Branches were broken at chest height, not waist height. Whatever it was tall. That's when the whispers started. Soft at first, almost lost under the rain, coming from everywhere and nowhere. Not words, just breath shaped into sound, rising and falling like a lullaby, spoken by a throat full of gravel. I froze, light sweeping side to side. Nothing to see but wet trunks and curtains of leaves. Then a branch snapped to my right, sharp and deliberate. Another to my left. Whatever was out there wasn't trying to hide anymore. It was circling. I turned and ran. The flashlight beam bounced wild, painting the trees in frantic white strokes. I burst back onto the road, sliding in the mud, boots skidding, and saw my car doors standing open. All 4 of them. Rain poured in, soaking the seats, the floor mats, the birthday presents I'd wrapped in the back. I know I'd locked it. I always lock it. I ran to the driver's side, slammed the door, reached across, and pulled the others shut one by one, hands shaking so bad I could barely work the handles. The engine turned over on the first try. I threw it into reverse, backed out of the ditch, and floored it. The whispers followed me inside the car, clearer now, riding the air like smoke. I cranked the heat, the radio, anything to drown them out. The seats in the back were soaked through, water still dripping from the ceiling, but the weight was wrong. The car felt lower, heavier, like I'd picked up a passenger the size of a refrigerator. Cold air moved across the back of my neck, steady and deliberate, the way breath feels when someone stands too close behind you in line. I didn't look in the mirror. I couldn't. I just drove, knuckles white, eyes locked on the tunnel of light ahead. Mile after mile, the breathing stayed with me, wet and ragged, patient. Sometimes it paused, like it was listening to the engine, learning the rhythm. Then it spoke. One word, low and thick, dragged up from somewhere deep, home. The voice wasn't human. It came from the back seat, from the roof, from inside my own skull all at once. I screamed. I remember that part clear as day, a sound I didn't know I could make. My foot slipped off the gas, and the car slowed. In the rearview mirror, something shifted, a darker shape against the dark, hunched forward, head almost touching the ceiling. Shoulders too wide, neck too long, face lost in shadow, except for two wet gleams where eyes should be. I jerked the wheel and skidded onto the first wide spot I saw, an old picnic area the Forest Service quit maintaining years ago. I bailed out into the rain, leaving the door open, and ran until my lungs burned. I don't know how long I stood there under the dripping trees, soaked to the bone, waiting for footsteps that never came. When I finally walked back, shaking, the car sat quiet. Doors still open, seats empty, no prints on the wet upholstery except mine. But the claw marks were there. 4 deep parallel grooves raked across the back seat, through the fabric and into the foam, still dripping water like they'd been made seconds ago. Another set on the inside of the rear door, high up, like something I tried to hold on when I took a curve too fast. I traced one with a trembling finger. It was warm. I drove the rest of the way with every light in the car on, windows down, so the storm could scream over whatever was left inside. Made it to my brother's just before dawn. Told them I'd hit a washout, needed to dry out. They bought it. Kids were already up, excited for cake and presents. I smiled, hugged my niece, and never said a word about the mud still smeared across the back seat or the smell of wet earth that wouldn't air out no matter how long I left the doors open in the sun. I scrapped the car a month later. Couldn't stand to sit in it anymore. But the smell followed me. Sometimes when the rain comes hard and I'm driving a different vehicle, I feel the seat behind me sag, just a little. Cold air brushes the back of my neck, patient as ever. And on the worst nights, when the wipers can't keep up and the road disappears underwater, I hear that same wet breathing settle in, waiting for me to say the word it's been trying to reach all these years. Home. I never slow down anymore. I never stop, because I know what's riding with me now, and I know it's only a matter of time before the storm is bad enough, and the road lonely enough that I finally turn around and take it where it wants to go.